Thank you. So I put all my notes and text on the floor because I cannot use anymore. And first of all, I want to say thanks to Jeff because I like what your talk and I like your architecture, but I completely disagree because I belong to another world. I mean, I'm living in a small island, Venice. And when you are in the island, you think to be in the entire world. So you have to accept my position. But in any case, I have a great respect about your work. But I am here not because I have or I should show my work. Oh, I would like, I could. But this time I am here because I would like, I promised them to talk about a little bit the work of Peter Eisenman. Because in Peter Eisenman's work, there is something that for me is really deep and really great, and it has been my obsession for years. I mean, I work with Peter, I met Jeff, and so we did many projects together. Then I came back to Italy, but I never stopped to think about which kind of language is doing Peter Eisenman. So, but before to go straight to Eisenman's project, or Eisenman's work, I just needed to, just keep the light on, just a little bit, because so far I don't show any images, and just in 10 minutes. But before to start and show the Eisenman work, I need to develop some thoughts, because otherwise all my talk become incomprehensible. So the first thing, before somebody talk about Marx, and unfortunately we are living in the prophecy of Marx, when Marx wrote everything melt into the air. I mean, I don't want to be melted into the air, for sure. This is one. But second, I want to quote or to cite an Italian philosopher that Peter Eisenman likes him a lot, and this Giorgio Agamben. Giorgio Agamben, he wrote also some text for Peter, but he recently wrote a very thin book, just I think 15 pages, just a short article, short text. And the title of this book is Che cosa è il contemporaneo? What is it, the contemporary? But in the letter that I received from the university, the letter for invitation is written at least 4 times the notion of contemporary. What does it mean to be in, because why we are here to discuss about what? We are here is 2012, and not 1 century ago or maybe 100 in the future. So, Giorgio Agamben says that to be contemporary, to be contemporary is correct, is not to be blind by the light of the century, because we are in the stream, in the stream of the beam of the darkness that we receive in plenty of our face. Agamben says that to be in the contemporary age, it means to look the darkness and to be able to discover some lights that are hidden in the darkness. This is the meaning of to be contemporary. That's a big effort. From my point of view, I think the architecture deals always with tragedy. Good tragedy, but tragedy. Because architecture needs to combine many, many things. And this combination is so tough today. And I don't think that today architecture can only play, even though, I mean, I have a respect to whom likes to play. But there is another term that I don't think that doesn't exist in English or in Italian. I mean, my own language is Italian, and I'm sorry for don't have the capability to speak very, very nicely in this foreigner language for me. But there is many times the speakers before my turn, they use the term image. Image is another question very tough to me, very tough. But just now I'm using a Hebrew culture to understand better this notion. In Hebrew, image, imagine, it means selem, S-E-L-E-M. But selem, it means image, has the first root is sel, S-E-L. It means darkness. So each image in Hebrew culture is linked with darkness. So also all our images are linked with darkness. But we need to go into the darkness and to discover the feeble lights of images, to pick up and to reveal in our age. So, I think, and I'm closing this first introduction, but for example, I could use also the word architectura, architecture. Architecture is not just a simple word, because it is made by two terms, arche and techne. So these two words, if you know the etymology of these terms, are completely two opposite words. Because arche, it means something that, how do you say, immutable, is a vertical axis. But techne is horizontal axis, and he's going everywhere because he needs to keep together the whole necessity of our life. So techne is grasp together all our vicissitudini, our needs. But arche is something that allows architecture to produce something that is special, and we will understand, analyzing Eisenman's work, what it means, this special. So there is another question that I needed to introduce first. We used to speak using words like object or house, architecture, land, ground, everything. Yes, but for me, it's impossible to understand something if just we remain on the same level of the meaning of this word. It's impossible, because each word has another level, hidden or above level, that reflects these meanings. So this second level, for example, the old poets says that each object in the earth has the symbol in the sky. And there is much more symbol in the sky than objects on the earth. So, but this duality is not, it's not just to symbolize something. It's the real essence of everything. So, just one question. Are we consciousness about what does it mean, our contemporary time or culture? I don't think it's so easy to give this answer. Because our contemporary culture derives from the Western culture when in the beginning of the 4th century before Christ, it was born the philosophy, the Greek philosophy. And the Greek philosophy gave to the track to our Western thought until now. But there is a big differences between that beginning and now. Because in that beginning, the philosophy or the philosophers were used to think, to switch, to swing the thoughts between what is mutable and what is immutable. So between metaphysics and between physics. But if you run along the horizon of our Western thought, today, our thought doesn't swing anymore. It's just stabilized, it's frozen only on the pole of mutable. Further just a little, we have in Italy a great philosopher called Emanuele Severino, where, sorry, oh, just I want to say that from the Greek philosophy, we arrive in our time, that is the time of technique and science. And technique and science, that its roots are in the burning of a philosophy. The roots of this knowledge we apply now here. Because everything in our age, under the domain of technique and science, is that everything are isolated, are unrelated. But at the beginning of the philosophy, all things were somehow related between mutable and immutable. And our time is the time of becoming, because the things comes from nothing, becomes something, and then they disappear into nothing again. But for example, and I mean, this philosopher, Severino, says that we are entering in the time where the appear is not the appear of becoming, but is the appear of timeless. So, for example, his books is so difficult to translate in English, and he has not so many books in English, not at all. Most are in German and mainly in Italian. But there is another position that is able to take an entire gaze to our Western culture. If we are not able to put on our basement the philosophy, how is possible to make a structure in our mind? So we can speak about everything, but I mean, without any, how do you say, any value in one sense. And then we will arrive to also to see this kind of question. For this reason, I want to make another specification, because otherwise everything becomes incomprehensible. So we spoke about just quickly about the relation between arche and techne. But the final level of architecture is always aesthetic. We cannot avoid that horizon, that layer, not at all. Because aesthetic in this case, it means everybody are in the aesthetic dimension. But the aesthetic is one of the most, how do you say, dirty word today. And I want to split in two terms. I don't know if in English it's possible, but in Italian it's easy. Aesthetic, I pronounce in aesthetical, maybe it's wrong, and aesthetical. So one is the male noun, and the other one is the female noun. So aesthetico or aesthetical is just the appear of things. Everything is appear. Everything's appear. So outside our will, outside our desire. I mean, we are here. Maybe somebody of us decided to create the world. I don't think so. So, and before we have aesthetic, general, and then we have the meaning. Doesn't exist that before we have the meaning and then we have the aesthetic. So the aesthetic is the unviolable plane, level, layer of our world, but for everything. So, just I want to go back to this aesthetical and aesthetical. Aesthetical is the objective appear of everything. aesthetical is the critical thoughts of our subjectivity in relation to the objectivity of the appearance. So that there is a gap, because today our knowledge doesn't put the relation between the appear of things and what is our knowledge in relation to this. So this question, it means that everything appear, everything are related. Relation, in this case, it means aesthetic. Because I am here, I can see you, I can see the ceiling, but the ceiling can see the floor, and the floor can see the trees outside, and so on. I mean, you can go to the endless universe. Everything, when appear, are related. Nothing is isolated. But our dominant culture, technique and science, try to how do you say, to give us this capability to think that we can create every time whatever we want. But it's not like this. Because in the aesthetical, there is a third rule that is not so easy. Because the third rule is that aesthetical is indifferent to our will. Doesn't matter if the aesthetic is good or bad, nice or worse. Doesn't matter. The aesthetical is aesthetical. Then we go back to our aesthetical knowledge. Our aesthetical knowledge try to put value or not value in what we are doing. This is another question. Even though I would like to say, hey guys, I want to be the best architect in the world. And then you see my project, and you say, what? So bad. So my will, what's up? Nothing. Because it's something more different that allows you to do or not to do better or worse things. So just to say this, that the architect is not, I don't think that the architect is a free mind, or is really a free mind when we have the consciousness about what does it mean freedom. To be really free, it means to face in the eyes the truth. I mean, don't ask me now what does it mean the truth, but there is the truth that architecture developed in century and century and century and century again. And today, when I'm speaking about now, about Eisenman, there is one possibility of this truth. And the truth for us is always linked something that metaphysics and something that is really belongs to our individuality. Because architecture born and we are able to develop because we put in the same times our body and our mind and our knowledge. So we cannot escape from the body. You cannot. And you cannot escape from your mind. At least maybe you can escape because you use the mind of technique and science. So, but it means that you are not doing anything. So, this question is not, how do you say, implies to reopen every time, but every time our words. There is no words we can use just in a simple way. Because every time the words has its own scenario, its own big horizon. And if you are not able to have these two different levels of our knowledge, we can do whatever we want, but we are not able to grasp the real meaning of what we are doing. So in this case now I can start to show some slides. Maybe oh, I don't know here. Just if you can open. Yeah, did this one? Okay. Okay. So now we can switch off the light. So just I want to make, I introduce one question that is not so easy, but I don't want to spend too much time. Now I am analyzing the first period of Eisenman's work, and it's 20 years of his early projects. But this period, it has divided us in 3 different phases. And the question is, before to say anything about this, but how is possible that an architect like Peter Eisenman was able to produce in less than 20 years 3 different languages in architecture, completely different to each other? So if we, the first phase is the phase of houses or cardboard architecture, but these houses are numbered from 1 to 10. In that period, the houses were not put on ground. The ground didn't exist. This is one. The second period started with to put the project into the ground. So the houses were grounded. Half houses was sinking into the ground and half was above. And with this project started to, how do you say? He started to leave out the numbers and using the title. So the first house is house L11A, and then house Find Out House, and beach, how do you say, Long Beach Project, many others. So everybody more or less knows this question. And the third period, the last one, is when the project finds exactly the place. And this place, in this case, it becomes broken. So the third phase is the breaking ground, I'm sorry. So the first phase is the phase of reverberations. The second phase is the phase of L shape, and the third one is the phase of scaling. So let's, here. Oh yeah, here. Okay. Eisenman, he wrote many texts on his project, many. So he used writings in the same way he using his projects to design architecture. But in this case, what I want to point out now is that Peter Eisenman, his culture, his roots are in the Hebrew culture. When I'm talking about the Hebrew culture, I'm using this interview made in the 1985 to blueprint by Jeanette Abrams. And he explained in a very simple way. Simple doesn't mean to simplify too much, but he explained his attitude and his obsession in this field. So I don't want to say that Peter Eisenman comes only from his culture, because also he has been influenced by contemporary architecture, avant-garde art, and whatever you want, literature and many other things. But the real ground where there are the hidden forces of his language is based in the Hebrew culture. So, for example, here, this is the fragment text they took out from the previous interview. So, for him, the architecture has to be a text. And also he says, the image is not an Hebraic notion, instructs Eisenman. Build onto me no graven images. So, one question now. There is the theory or the deconstruction theory There is another level is the dissimulation, and there is another level even on the bottom, that is the Hebrew culture. And we will see it. So, Kabbalah. I mean, I don't want to read this because you can read it. It's easy. So, he says that he's not interested in Torah or Talmud, but he's interested in Kabbalah because the Kabbalah is the interpretation of interpretation. Culture. I am a cultural Jew, like Walter Benjamin. And Walter Benjamin, his thought, helps us to understand very deeply the work of Peter. So, and then theology and origins. So this is another bigger question, because theology, he says that he's not theology in the religion meaning. I mean, no, I'm sorry. For him, theology is really theology. But look, in an architecture with attempts to stand outside the Greek Christian tradition. So what does it mean this? It means that the Hebrew paradigm, the Hebrew theological paradigm needs to overcome now the Greek Christian theology. He wants to shift from that kind of iconology or iconology to shift into another world of iconology. And for example, for sure the differences is completely, is huge differences, because in the Greek Christian theology is based on the presence, is anthropological presence. God is like a man. He has the same symmetry and the same visibility, and we produce in this tradition endless, figure structure about this. But the Hebrew theology is another kind of iconology, but is completely different than the present, because it's based on the notion of absence. Absence. So absence doesn't mean that you don't have any images. You have another kind of images. Totally, completely different. So, but in this case, if we don't go into understand what does it mean for Eisenman Kabbalah, we cannot understand his work. Because in the heritage, in the repertoire of Kabbalah, there are incredible symbols. Or now, symbols, we should, analyze in a very deep way this question, because today the symbol doesn't mean anything. It is overused. So he lost all his deep meaning. But just to give one definition, the symbols are the resistant forces that they are able to determine your iconology. And here there are three fundamental symbols in the history of the Hebrew tradition. The first one is the symbol of Sephirot. The second one is the symbol of Tzimtzum. And the third one is the symbol of Shephirah, Hakelim. But these symbols, the Sephirot, quickly, are just the 10 layers between the Ein Sof, I'm translating with the God, but it's not the God, between Ein Sof and Malkut, the presence of our earth. Okay? There are 10 different layers, but this level, they receive the light from the Ein Sof, and this level are like a mirror and reverberates this energy through all these 10 different layers. So if you analyze the first period of Eisenman houses, all his projects are made by like cuts. So the Sephirot is a cosmic cut, is a cosmic incision. And in this case, Eisenman, he's producing this incredible language, never saw, grasping the iconological energy from that kind of work. So the second, but the first symbol is the symbol of innocence of the Hebrew tradition. Because the Hebrew, in this case, they didn't have the exile. They didn't have the experience of the exile. But now, after centuries, the Hebrew, they understood what does it mean, the pain and the suffering of the exile. And becomes, the second symbol is the tzimtzum. The tzimtzum is not the process of emanation like in the first one. But first of all, is the contraction and the expansion of this process of creation. So, in this case, Eisenman elaborates a second language that it calls L-shape and produce and invent a new totally, design in architecture. And I'm going faster to the last one, until when the third symbol is Shevira Akeli. This myth or this symbol comes after the experience of the diaspora from 15th century from Spain. And in this case, the pain and the suffering of this the Hebrew people, they need to elaborate another symbol, and this is the broken shells. So the light that comes from the Ein Sof is not able to be reflected like in the first one, or is not anymore this process of contraction and expansion like in the second one. But in the third case, everything is broken. So it's like to hit the first glass or the first shell and go like this until the end. So when we did, for example, this project, we used three glasses to draw this, to design this project. And we had 20 plates made, each of plates with the 3 glasses, and the reverberation of the figure of the project comes from this far away, source of iconology. So just how to compare, like, because the Kabbalah is a visual repertoire of symbols, and there are endless representation of this. So I go quickly and okay. So I am at the end. So when Eisenman declared that he wants to have an architecture without origin, arbitrary, and not representational, not representative, he says the truth just for the 50%, because the other 50% is completely linked into its origin, is full of representations, and is not arbitrary at all. Is not absolutely not arbitrary, because his effort, his obsession is to bring in our time the whole history of these people, that they never get the capability for more than 20 years to design something in architecture in reality. But today we needed to conclude in this way, because we are in this situation. Our culture now is dominated by the paradigm of atheological thought or atheological culture. Then we have the theological paradigm of Greek Christian on the present. But then We have the theological paradigm of the absence that belongs to the Hebrew thought and culture. So the dissimulation in Peter is absolutely important, not because he lied, not at all, because the dissimulation is the other part of the election, for example. And his writings are also to build incredible belt around his architecture, because he needs to maintain alive the center of his discourse. But for me, this is an heroic effort to make architecture today, even though I am not a Hebrew architect. But the same, but he was teaching in New York with Jeff Kipnis, yes, for sure, but also with John Haydock. And John Haydock is another architect that for all his life, he based his architecture on the theology of Greek Christian culture. He dedicated 120 poems to God, to Jesus, to, how do you say, Maria, Madonna, to the angels. And he designed crucifixions. He designed many churches. And he was born in Bronx. And he was teaching at Cooper Union. What do you want to say? I want to say that it's okay, I mean, deconstruction. Perfect. But there is something that even more deeper and more, how do you say, resistant, is the theology. But theology in this case doesn't mean anything about religion, because the theology is the iconic universe that belongs to each of us. Because we are theological person. And the man is the man that produces every time symbols, even though it's abstract symbols or iconic symbols, but are always symbols. And when we produce in this time, our bad architecture is the symbol of our violence, because we don't understand that each thing reverberated its own symbol. Thank you.
Mr. Rizzi, can you come here, please?
I am a cultural Christian.
Yeah. Is this one? You say that deconstruction in some way has not taken account of theology, and you specified by saying that it's a particular kind of theology that is owned by each person, or I wasn't quite sure about how, because it seemed to me that actually theology is the question of deconstruction. The question. And the theological status, the center, the structure, the center that is out of play, and so on. The concentration in the dominant discourse, etc., the standing up, construction, everything, is its aspirations toward the theological is exactly where deconstruction enters.
No, but I'm sorry, I agree with you. I mean, if I said something against this, against deconstruction, I am sure deconstruction, he's facing the notion, the question of theology. But for me, the theology in this case is not just the theology in the religion domain, but when I try to explain the differences between aesthetical and aesthetical, in English it's very complicated, but the theology is the highest noun of aesthetic. because, I mean, our aesthetic is a link with theology, because theology, in the original meaning of this, is that theos, it means to whom has a look from the unusual to the usual. So it means that the original gaze, where you can see the entire cosmos with all relationship all together, all things, you can identify the individuality of the things, but also you are able to understand the whole relation of everything. This is the meaning of theology. So for this reason, a deep deconstruction faced with this question. But for example, today, using again the name theology, it looks like a crime. Because we are in the age where the theology has completely different meanings. That's the question.
I don't think he was, I mean, I don't think that I'm just thinking what you're processing, what you're saying, so interesting. You're saying, if I understand it, you're saying that there is that there was a mistaken, that the theological critique in deconstruction was mistaken in the sense that it referred only to a contemporary theory of religion or a practice or a religious practice. But I thought it was in a way that it used, that it understood theology in exactly the way you're saying it, that it understood theology as that the power of the image, it was the power of a particular construction that was not allowed to be interrogated, was not allowed to be opened up precisely because of its aesthetic closure, its symbolic closure to question. And so I'm not quite sure how an aesthetic or aesthetical theology is exempt from the deconstructive, critique.
I mean, in a simple way, but just to say that theology, and then images, but our brain works producing and mapping images every time. But we have images that are visible, and we have images that are invisible. The real images full of power and full of forces are always invisible and belongs to that side of reality that Walter Benjamin called theology. And we need, for Benjamin, to go in the same way with two different directions, from theology to the object, and from the phenomenological world to the object. But one is the logic way of going into producing concept, and the other one is the way of representation, because it's not possible to explain theology. So, I mean, I know that I run very fast, but this question is huge question, really huge question. But I think that here, from my point of view, I mean, I don't want to say that is the most important key point for architecture, only for myself. I'm sorry.
So I think that the question is, does your argument rely on these words of the theology of an iconic universe, i.e. using the word iconic? When I could very much argue that architecture does not depend on the iconic. Let me say this. Architecture has been tempted so much to play on the religious iconic image and its analogies. Often we had internally a number of conversations, and Witness and I questioning whether we should talk about canons or not. religious analogies. My concern about your analysis is that if I extend it, and especially if I take simply a very, very easy example, which is the Deconstructivist exhibition in 1988, I would see that I have Libeskind, Gehry, and Eisenman, who share a great background. I have Koolhaas, the Dutch Calvinist one, Will Briggs, an Austro-Hungarian Catholic one, and Zaha Hadid, an Islamic. Will you then start to explain the work of Zaha Hadid based on a particular language or study?
I mean, I agree, but tell me why, for example, today, Peter Eisenman, Frank Gehry, Daniel Libeskind, Richard Meyer, then Stanley Tigerman, and Calatrava also Tafuri. Why all these people today are able to produce this kind of architecture, but all these people belong to the Hebrew culture? I mean, I want to say that if I am not able to understand their own iconology, I cannot understand my iconology. And today, I'm sorry, just 1 second. Today, we are in the domain of a theological paradigm. So, and this is a huge and powerful paradigm, this one.
But this relies on the definition of architecture as the invention of icons, when I would say that architecture is the invention of concept and ideas, and not of icons.
But the idea are images, every time. Images. Every abstract thought, every emotion, every sentimental becomes images. And we act in relation to this. And today, the neurophysics, they tell this. They are telling us this question.
I would say that it is a return to, a few thousand years ago, to consider that architecture is still nothing but the production of images. And that's a long conversation. I might bring it back a bit this afternoon, but I'm concerned saying that the roots of a deep analysis, because it was what you did was fascinating, but at the same time my question was whether it was based on proper premises, that is, that ideas, concept, and images are all part of the same realm, the same category, which they are not.
Let me prosecute.
But
to think. The first one is, do you think that we can continue to play the song, the refrain, Heideggerian refrain against the technique? Our power is dominated by the technique. I think it is very, very old, and it doesn't work anymore. I think in philosophy, I think so. And strictly for Derrida, his opposition against the technique, it doesn't work. Never. In grammatology began speaking about the possibility to rethink about the relation with the technique, starting from the writing, that is a condition of possibility of the experience. But this is one. The second, I don't know, I think that we have to be a little bit careful with what means Jewish culture, to be Jewish, because it's a word very complete. Derrida too was Jewish, but it's not done.
it's no problem.
No, for example, you tell that the absence is the fundamental category for the Jewish culture. I don't think so. I think that is separation, ruah.
So listen,
It's not, and
Eisenman, he described and he analyzed this question. I mean, do you think that the
Yes,
work of
but
Eisenman
Eisenman
is
is
just
not,
coming like by chance, like this?
Yes, but you know, in the letter of Peter Eisman, no? You know, the famous text, Derrida exactly criticized this use of the absence, saying that is a polar term in a dialectical relation with absence called immediately presence. And Derrida exactly advised Eisman about this. If you use absence, you are always in the circle of dialectic, and you presuppose and you call presence. And at the same time, always in this letter, Walter Benjamin, Derrida called Erfahrung und Armut by Benjamin very strictly, and Peter Eisman, in your answer, he says that he never read this text. Now, I think that we have to, it's interesting the perspective, but I think that we have to be a little bit more rigorous and attentive. Only this. Because Eisman was Jewish, but I was born in a Catholic family. But
yes,
I don't.
And then?
But I don't know that that I say is originated by this. No?
Yes, but
maybe I'm totally ignorant of Catholicism.
I mean, you should say that my analysis was completely wrong or invented. So I worked with Peter 10 years, and I started to learn the Hebrew culture. I'm working with Hebrew people in Venice. They are reading Tanakh. Tanakh is the original book of Bible in Hebrew. And I'm doing courses in university in Venice about this. But tell me, do you think that the work of Peter is just banal and but do you think that how he was able to produce these different languages in his first 20 years period, and then to develop everything inside the notion of diagram? The diagram is another deep question in the Hebrew culture again. I mean, I don't want to say anything, just that the richness to reach the level of theology, not religion frame, but into the static iconology. Before here we are not able to understand, because about the icon or iconology, there are too many different meanings.
Sorry, I mean, I can't...
Renato, you have to...
It feels as though the discussion is getting into a rather kind of obscurantist territory.
At least the Jew is on the table.
First of all, I mean, while I know exactly what you mean if you talk about Christian theology, I think you'd be hard pushed to really suggest there was a kind of Jewish theology, you know, as if it was some equal but different activity from Christian theology. And thirdly, I keep thinking, you know, if Peter illuminated you in this way and told you all these things over a period, I think he must have thought you were a client.
I don't understand. Sorry.
It was an insult. It was a Jewish insult. I think what Mark says is correct. A great theorist of the Jewish religion would say there's no theology in Judaism. Judaism is constructed on arguments, not on, there is no canonic theology. There is only a set of, when you read the Pirkei Avot, it's what each rabbi argues with the other. Hang on, let me finish. Hang on.
Yeah.
For example, every one of your Hebrew words was written backwards. So you don't even get the Hebrew right. But it's okay with me, because I think you're right. I do think, the thing I think you're saying is that this idea of absence, and that there is a kind of Jewish Hebrewism that we all live today, that the atheology of today has a certain kind of root in Judaism and nomadic thought. And so there is something, I think, to what you said. I think the fact that everybody in this audience is incredibly uncomfortable says something about the merits of what you're talking about. I wanted to ask you this, for example, a slightly different, one thing I would like to tell the students, for example, is the broken glass idea. One more thing. In Judaism, for example, there's no such thing as heresy.
There is no.
No such thing as heresy. There is forbidden text and permitted text. The Kabbalah is a forbidden text, but it's not heretical. Heresy belongs to a theology. So the question of what, I think what you're interested in, and I think you're right, in order to act really in the world, you cannot be apostate or pagan. You have to be either canonic or heretical. And I do think that there's some merit, and I think your analysis of Peter is an analysis of his systematic architectural heresy. But I do have, I think for me, quite personally, a more important question. Every discipline, from music, science, I mean, their counterintuitive moment is cast in terms of comedy. For example, quantum mechanics, these are comic moments in their discipline. If you just simply understand tragedy means the hero dies in the end, so the idea that things keep moving and keep living is a comic idea. The only discipline left, I know, that maintains its faithful dedication to only half of the world is architecture, which, as you said, you are committed to it as a tragic practice. Why not, if you are really interested in a true, fulsome cosmology, should architecture stay strictly devoted to tragedy?
I agree.
Okay.
Conviction completed.
But we need to escape some, how do you say, petrified meanings in theology. Because otherwise, today you cannot use this term. Because suddenly you break some certainties in our age. So, I am not a religion, I don't speak in a religion way. Not at all.
Okay, we'll leave this discussion open, and later on we will have the man himself that you can speak with and discuss. I mean your point of departure, Peter Eisenman. It's
So the project of the 3 broken glasses that Renato described, what happened was, in a studio, a student walked in, literally walked in, had 3 pieces of glass, hit them with a hammer, and broke the 3 pieces of glass, and Peter's eyes opened up. So it was not the Kabbalah. It may have been because of the Kabbalah. I'm not arguing with you. But it was because, but oftentimes, incredible things happen from the students to the teachers. And every time I hear these examples, I want to remind everybody that that's often what, and with Peter, it's like a lot. So,
In this case, I think Peter was a genius to do this.
I was teaching.
we'll continue at 4 o'clock. Thank you very much.